The Royal Marine Corps, or Royal Marines, is a branch of the British Armed Forces. It is the Marine Corps and amphibious infantry of the United Kingdom, and forms part of the Naval Service under its own command. The Royal Marines were formed in 1755 as Marine Infantry for the Royal Navy. However, it can trace its origins back to the formation of the Duke of York and Albany's Maritime Regiment of Foot at the grounds of the Honourable Artillery Company on October 28, 1664. The Royal Marines are a maritime-focused, amphibious, highly specialised light infantry force of commandos. They are capable of deploying at short notice in support of Her Majesty's government's military and diplomatic objectives overseas. The Royal Marines are organised into a light infantry brigade and a number of separate units including the Special Boat Service, 1 Assault Group Royal Marines, Fleet Protection Group Royal Marines, and a company within the Special Forces Support Group. The Corps operates in all environments and climates, though particular expertise and training is spent on amphibious warfare, Arctic warfare, mountain warfare, expeditionary warfare, rapid reaction and supporting special forces. Throughout its history, the Royal Marines have seen action in a number of major wars, often fighting beside the British Army including the 7 Years' War, the Napoleonic Wars, the Crimean War, World War I and World War II. In recent times the Corps has been largely deployed in expeditionary warfare roles such as the Falklands War, the Gulf War, the Bosnian War, the Kosovo War, the Sierra Leone Civil War, the Iraq War and the war in Afghanistan. The Royal Marines have close international ties with Allied Marine Forces, particularly the United States Marine Corps and the Netherlands Marine Corps Corps Mariniers. History. The Royal Marines were formed as part of the Naval Service in 1755. However, it can trace its origins back as far as October 28, 1664 when at the grounds of the Honourable Artillery Company the Duke of York and Albany's Maritime Regiment of Foot was first formed. Early British Empire. On April 5, 1755, His Majesty's Marine Forces, 50 companies in 3 divisions, headquartered at Chatham, Portsmouth, and Plymouth, were formed by order of Council under Admiralty control. Initially all field officers were Royal Navy officers as the Royal Navy felt that the ranks of Marine field officers were largely honorary. This meant that the farthest a Marine officer could advance was to Lieutenant Colonel. It was not until 1771 that the first Marine was promoted to Colonel. This attitude persisted well into the 1800s. During the rest of the 18th century, they served in numerous landings all over the world, the most famous being the landing at Belle Isle on the Brittany coast in 1761. They also served in the American War of Independence, being particularly courageous in the Battle of Bunker Hill led by Major John Pitcairn. These Marines also often took to the ship's boats to repel attackers in small boats when errant ships on close blockade were becalmed. In 1788 a detachment of 4 companies of Marines, under Major Robert Ross, accompanied the First Fleet to protect a new colony at Botany Bay. Due to an error the fleet left Portsmouth without its main supply of ammunition, and were not resupplied after arrival. Recent research claims that by early 1789 the Marines in New South Wales were running out of ammunition and had no other option than to use smallpox against local tribes to protect themselves and the settlement, although earlier authors suggested the infection was accidental, or from actions unsanctioned by the governor of the colony, Naval Captain Arthur Phillip. In 1802, largely at the instigation of Admiral E. L. St. Vincent, they were titled the Royal Marines by King George III. The Royal Marines Artillery was formed as a separate unit in 1804 to man the artillery and bomb ketches. These had been manned by the Army's Royal Regiment of Artillery, but a lawsuit by a Royal Artillery officer resulted in a court decision that Army officers were not subject to naval orders. As their MA uniforms were the blue of the Royal Regiment of Artillery, they were nicknamed the Blue Marines, and the infantry element, who wore the scarlet uniforms of the British infantry, became known as the Red Marines, often given the semi-derogatory nickname Lobsters by sailors. During the Napoleonic Wars the Royal Marines participated in every notable naval battle on board the Royal Navy's ships and also took part in multiple amphibious actions. Marines had a dual function aboard ships of the Royal Navy in this period. Routinely, They ensured the security of the ship's officers and supported their maintenance of discipline in the ship's crew, and in battle, they engaged the enemy's crews, whether firing from positions on their own ship, or fighting in boarding actions. The Marines continued in their on-board function after the war, taking a prominent part in the Navy's anti-piracy and anti-slavery actions. In 1855 they were newly designated as the Royal Marines Light Infantry, serving in the Crimean War and numerous amphibious raids on Russian forces. The Royal Navy suffered a shortage in manpower within the Marines during these long wars, and regular infantry units from the Army occasionally had to be used as shipboard replacements. In the Caribbean theatre, volunteers from freed French slaves on Marie Galante were used to form the First Corps of Colonial Marines. These men bolstered the ranks, helping the British to hold the island until reinforcements arrived. This practice was repeated during the War of 1812, where escaped American slaves were formed into the Second Corps of Colonial Marines. These men were commanded by Royal Marines officers and fought alongside their regular Royal Marines counterparts at the Battle of Bladensburg. Throughout the war, Royal Marines units raided up and down the east coast of America, including up the Penobscot River and in the Chesapeake Bay. They fought in the Battle of New Orleans and later helped capture Fort Beauwire in Mobile Bay in what was the last action of the war. In 1855 the infantry forces were renamed the Royal Marines Light Infantry, and in 1862 the name was slightly altered to Royal Marine Light Infantry. The Royal Navy did not fight any other ships after 1850 and became interested in landings by naval brigades. In these naval brigades, the function of the Royal Marines was to land first and act as skirmishers ahead of the sailor infantry and artillery. This skirmishing was the traditional function of light infantry. For most of their history, British Marines had been organised as fusiliers. It was not until 1923 that the separate artillery and light infantry forces were formally amalgamated into the Corps of Royal Marines. In the rest of the 19th century the Royal Marines served in many landings, especially in the First and Second Opium Wars against the Chinese. These were all successful except for the landing at the mouth of the Peiho in 1859, where Admiral Sir James Hope ordered a landing across extensive mud flats even though his brigadier, Colonel Thomas Lemon RMLI, advised against it. During the Crimean War in 1854 and 1855, 3 Royal Marines earned the Victoria Cross, 2 in the Crimea and 1 in the Baltic. The use of the new torpedoes by the Russians in the Baltic made the campaign there particularly suited to RM raiding and reconnaissance parties. Landings by the British and French Navy and Marines in 1854 were repulsed by the Russians at Petropavlovsk on the Pacific coast of Russia. The Royal Marines also played a prominent role in the Boxer Rebellion in China, where a Royal Marine earned a Victoria Cross. For the first part of the 20th century, the Royal Marines' role was the traditional one of providing shipboard infantry for security, boarding parties and small-scale landings. The Marines' other traditional position on a Royal Navy ship was manning X and Y gun turrets. Pursuing a career in the Marines had been considered social suicide through much of the 18th and 19th centuries, since Marine officers had a lower standing than their counterparts in the Royal Navy. An effort was made in 1907 through the Common Entry or Selborne scheme to reduce the professional differences between RN and RM officers through a system of common entry that provided for an initial period of service where both groups performed the same roles and underwent the same training. Upon promotion to lieutenant, officers could opt for permanent service with the Royal Marines. The scheme was abandoned after 3 years when only 2 of the new entrants chose this option over that of service as naval officers, for whom promotion prospects were much greater. At the outbreak of World War I the Corps was 58 subalterns under establishment. World Wars. During the First World War, in addition to their usual stations aboard ship, Royal Marines were part of the Royal Naval Division which landed in Belgium in 1914 to help defend Antwerp and later took part in the amphibious landing at Gallipoli in 1915. It also served on the Western Front. The division's first 2 commanders were Royal Marine Artillery Generals. Other Royal Marines acted as landing parties in the naval campaign against the Turkish fortifications in the Dardanelles before the Gallipoli landing. They were sent ashore to assess damage to Turkish fortifications after bombardment by British and French ships and, if necessary, to complete their destruction. The Royal Marines were the last to leave Gallipoli, replacing both British and French troops in a neatly planned and executed withdrawal from the beaches. It even required some Marines to wear French uniforms as part of the deception. In 1918 Royal Marines led the Zeebrugge raid. 5 Royal Marines earned the Victoria Cross in the First World War, 2 at Zeebrugge, 1 at Gallipoli, 1 at Jutland and 1 on the Western Front. After the war Royal Marines took part in the Allied intervention in Russia. In 1919, the 6th Battalion RMLI mutinied and was disbanded at Murmansk. The Royal Marine Artillery and Royal Marine Light Infantry were amalgamated on June 22, 1923. Post-war demobilization had seen the Royal Marines reduced from 55,000 to 15,000 in 1922 and there was Treasury pressure for a further reduction to 6,000 or even the entire disbandment of the Corps. As a compromise an establishment of 9,500 was settled upon, but this meant that 2 separate branches could no longer be maintained. The abandonment of the Marines' artillery role meant that the Corps would subsequently have to rely on Royal Artillery's support when ashore, that the title of Royal Marines would apply to the entire Corps and that only a few specialists would now receive gunnery training. As a form of consolation the dark blue and red uniform of the Royal Marine Artillery now became the full dress of the entire Corps. Royal Marine officers and SNCOs however continue to wear the historic scarlet in mess dress to the present day. The ranks of private, used by the RMLI, and gunner, used by the RMA, were abolished and replaced by the rank of Marine. During the Second World War, a small party of Royal Marines were first ashore at Namsos in April 1940, seizing the approaches to the Norwegian town preparatory to a landing by the British Army 2 days later. The Royal Marines formed the Royal Marine Division as an amphibiously trained division, parts of which served at Dakar and in the capture of Madagascar. In addition the Royal Marines formed mobile naval base defense organizations similar to the U.S. Marine Corps Defense Battalions. One of these took part in the defense of Crete. Royal Marines also served in Malaya and in Singapore, where due to losses they were joined with remnants of the 2nd Battalion, Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders to form the Plymouth Argylls. The Royal Marines formed one commando which served at Dieppe. 1 month after Dieppe, most of the 11th Royal Marine Battalion was killed or captured in an amphibious landing at Tobruk in Operation Agreement. Again the Marines were involved with the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders, this time the 1st Battalion. In 1942 the infantry battalions of the Royal Marine Division were reorganized as commandos, joining the Army Commandos. The division command structure became a Special Service Brigade Command. The support troops became landing craft crew and saw extensive action on D-Day. A total of 4 Special Service, later Commando, brigades were raised during the war, and Royal Marines were represented in all of them. A total of 9 RM Commandos were raised during the war, numbered from 40 to 48. 1 Commando Brigade had just 1 RM Battalion, no 45 Commando. 2 Commando Brigade had 2 RM Battalions, NOS 40 and 43 Commandos. 3 Commando Brigade also had 2, NOS 42 and 44 Commandos. 4 Commando Brigade was entirely Royal Marine after March 1944, comprising NOS 41, 46, 47 and 48 Commandos. 1 Commando Brigade took part in the assaults on Sicily and Normandy, campaigns in the Rhineland and crossing the Rhine. 2 Commando Brigade was involved in the Salerno landings, Entzio, Comacchio, and operations in the Argenta Gap. 3 Commando Brigade served in Sicily and Burma. 4 Commando Brigade served in Normandy and in the Battle of the Scheldt on the island of Walcheren during the clearing of Antwerp. In January 1945, 2 further RM brigades were formed, 116th Brigade and 117th Brigade. Both were conventional infantry, rather than in the commando role. 116th Brigade saw some action in the Netherlands, but 117th Brigade was hardly used operationally. In addition, 1 landing craft assault unit was stationed in Australia late in the war as a training unit. In 1946 the Army Commandos were disbanded, leaving the Royal Marines to continue the commando role. A number of Royal Marines served as pilots during the Second World War. It was a Royal Marines officer who led the attack by a formation of Blackburn skuas that sank the German cruiser Karl Paragraph Nigsberg. 18 Royal Marines commanded Fleet Air Arm squadrons during the course of the war, and with the formation of the British Pacific Fleet were well represented in the final drive on Japan. Captains and majors generally commanded squadrons, whilst in one case Lt. Colonel Asihe on HMS Indefatigable was Air Group Coordinator from HMS Victorious of the entire British Pacific Fleet. Throughout the war, Royal Marines continued in their traditional role of providing ships detachments and manning a proportion of the guns on cruisers and capital ships. They also provided the crew for the UK's minor landing craft, and the Royal Marines Armoured Support Group man sent her 4 tanks on D-Day. One of these is still on display at Pegasus Bridge. Only one Marine was awarded the Victoria Cross in the Second World War for action at Lake Comacchio in Italy. Hunter was the last RM Commando to be awarded the medal. The Royal Marines Boom Patrol Detachment under Blondie Hazeler carried out Operation Frankton and provided the basis for the post-war continuation of the SBS. Post-colonial era, the Corps underwent a notable change after 1945. However, when the Royal Marines took on the main responsibility for the role and training of the British Commandos. The Royal Marines have an illustrious history, and since their creation in 1942 Royal Marines Commandos have engaged on active operations across the globe, every year, except 1968. Notably, they were the first ever military unit to perform an air assault insertion by helicopter, during the Suez Crisis in 1956. They were also part of the land element during the Falklands War. Today, personnel. The Royal Marines are part of the Naval Service and under the full command of Fleet Commander. The rank structure of the Corps is similar to that of the British Army, with officers and other ranks recruited and initially trained separately from other naval personnel. Women are only permitted to serve in the Royal Marines Band Service. On average, 1,200 recruits and 2,000 potential recruits, and 400 potential officers attend training courses and acquaint courses at CTCRM every year. At its height in 1944 during the Second World War, more than 70,000 people served in the Royal Marines. Following the Allied victory, the Royal Marines were quickly reduced to a post-war strength of 13,000. When national service finally came to an end in 1960, the Marines were again reduced, but this time to an all-commando trained force of 9,000 personnel. As of December 1, 2013, the Royal Marines had a strength of 7,730 regular and 700 Royal Marines Reserve, giving a combined component strength of around 8,430 personnel. The Royal Marines are the only European Marine force capable of conducting amphibious operations at brigade level. Equipment. Infantry. The basic infantry weapon of the Royal Marines is the L-85A2 assault rifle, sometimes equipped with the L-123A3 underslung grenade launcher. Support fire is provided by the L-110A1 light machine gun, the L-7A2 general-purpose machine gun and the L-111A1 heavy machine gun. Indirect fire by the L-16A2 81mm mortar. Sniper rifles used include the L-115A3, produced by Accuracy International. More recently, the L-129A1 has come into service as the designated marksman rifle. Other weapons include the Javelin anti-tank missile, the L-107A1 pistol, the L-131A1 pistol and the Fairbairn Sykes fighting knife. Armor. The Royal Marines maintain no heavy armored units, instead, they operate a fleet of lightly armored and highly mobile vehicles intended for amphibious landings or rapid deployment. The primary armored fighting vehicle operated by the Armored Support Group is the BVS-10 Viking all-terrain armored vehicle. Other lighter vehicles include the Land Rover Wolf armored patrol vehicle, the Jackal armored vehicle and the Pinsker high mobility all-terrain vehicle. Artillery support is provided by the 29 Commando Regiment Royal Artillery of the British Army, utilising the L-118 light gun, a 105 mm tow howitzer. The regiment is commando trained. Aviation. The Fleet Air Arm and Royal Air Force provide transport and attack helicopters in support of the Royal Marines. It uses both Sea King transport and Lynx attack helicopters from the Fleet Air Arm to provide direct aviation support for the corporation. However, The Air Force additionally provides Chinook heavy lift, Merlin HC-3 and Puma HC-1 medium lift transport helicopters. Vessels. The Royal Marines operate a varied fleet of military watercraft designed to transport troops from ship to shore or conduct river or estuary patrols. These include the 2000 TDX landing craft Air Cushion, the Mk-9 and Mk-10 landing craft utility, the Mk-5 landing craft vehicle personnel and the SDV Mk-8 Mod 1 swimmer delivery vehicle for special forces. Other smaller amphibious craft such as the offshore raiding craft, rigid raider and inflatable raiding craft are in service in much greater numbers. Formation and structure. The overall head of the Royal Marines is Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, in her role as Commander-in-Chief of the British Armed Forces. The ceremonial head of the Royal Marines is the Captain General Royal Marines. The current Captain General is Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. Full command of the Royal Marines is vested in the Fleet Commander with the Commandant General Royal Marines, a Major General, embedded within the Navy Command Headquarters as Commander UK Amphibious Force. The operational capability of the Corps comprises a number of battalion-plus-sized units, of which 5 are designated as commandos. 40 Commando based at Norton Manor Barracks, Taunton, Somerset, England, 42 Commando based at Bickley Barracks, Plymouth, Devon, England, 43 Commando Fleet Protection Group Royal Marines based at HM Naval Base Clyde, Helensburgh, Argyll and Bute, 45 Commando based at RM Condor, Arbroath, Angus, Scotland, 30 Commando Information Exploitation Group based at Stonehouse Barracks, Plymouth, Commando Logistic Regiment based at Chivenor, Devon, Special Boat Service based at RM Poole, Dorset. 1 Assault Group Royal Marines based at RM Tamar, Devonport. With the exception of the 43 Commando Fleet Protection Group and Commando Logistic Regiment, which are each commanded by a full colonel, each of these units is commanded by a lieutenant colonel of the Royal Marines, who may have sub-specialised in a number of ways throughout his career. There is also a Mountain Leader Training Cadre based at Lympstone Commando Training Centre, Lympstone, Devon. 3 Commando Brigade. Operational command of the 5 commandos and the Commando Logistics Regiment is delegated to 3 Commando Brigade Royal Marines, of which they are a part. Based at Stonehouse Barracks, the brigade exercises control is directed by either Cinque Fleet or the Permanent Joint Headquarters. As the main combat formation of the Royal Marines, the brigade has its own organic capability to it in the field, 30 Commando Information Exploitation Group, a battalion-sized formation providing information operations capabilities, life support and security for the brigade headquarters, 43 Commando Fleet Protection Group Royal Marines, responsible for the security of the United Kingdom's nuclear deterrent and other security-related duties, was originally outside the brigade. However, from April 2012 it moved into it. It also provides specialist boarding parties and snipers for the Royal Navy worldwide, for roles such as embargo enforcement, counter-narcotics, counter-piracy and counter-insurgency activities of the Royal Navy. It is the largest unit in the brigade at 790 strong with a different structure from the other commandos. Independent elements. The independent elements of the Royal Marines are Commando Training Centre. This is the training unit for the entire corps, and consists of 3 separate sections. Commando Training Wing. This is the initial basic commando training section for new recruits to the Royal Marines, and the UK Forces All-Arms Commando Course. Specialist Wing. This provides specialist training in the various trades which Marines may elect to join once qualified and experienced in a rifle company. Command Wing. This provides command training for both officers and NCOs of the Royal Marines. 1 Assault Group Royal Marines provides training in the use of landing craft and boats, and also serves as a parent unit for the 3 assault squadrons permanently embarked on the Royal Navy's amphibious ships. 4 Assault Squadron Euro HMSA Bulwark, 6 Assault Squadron Euro HMSA Albion, 9 Assault Squadron Euro HMSA Ocean. Special Boat Service and Naval Special Forces and under operational command of Director Special Forces, UK Special Forces Group. It is commanded by a lieutenant colonel qualified as a swimmer canoeist. SBS responsibilities include waterborne operations, maritime counter-terrorism and other special forces tasks. Royal Marines Band Service provides regular bands for the Royal Navy and provides expertise to train RN volunteer bands. Musicians have a secondary role as medics and field hospital orderlies. Personnel may not be commando trained, wearing a dark blue beret instead of green. The band service is the only branch of the Royal Marines which admits women. Structure of a commando. The 3 commando units are each organised into 6 companies, further organised into platoon-sized troops, as follows: Command Company, Main Headquarters, Tactical Headquarters, Reconnaissance Troop with a Sniper Section, Mortar Troop, Anti-Tank Troop, Medium Machine Gun Troop, Logistic Company, A Echelon 1, A Echelon 2, FRT, RAP, B Echelon, 2 Close Combat Companies, Company Headquarters, 3 Close Combat Troops, 2 Standoff Companies, Company Headquarters, Heavy Machine Gun Troop, AT Troop, Close Combat Troop. In general, a rifle company Marine will be a member of a 4-man fire team, the building block of commando operations. A Royal Marine works with his team in the field and shares accommodation if living in barracks. This structure is a recent development. Formerly commandos were structured similarly to British Army light infantry battalions. During the restructuring of the United Kingdom's military services, the Corps evolved from a Cold War focus on NATO's northern flank towards a more expeditionary posture. Amphibious Task Group. Formerly known as the Amphibious Ready Group, the Amphibious Task Group is a mobile, balanced amphibious warfare force, based on a commando group and its supporting assets, that can be kept at high readiness to deploy into an area of operations. The ATG is normally based around specialist amphibious ships, most notably HMS Ocean, the largest ship in the British fleet. Ocean was designed and built to accommodate an embarked commando and its associated stores and equipment. The strategy of the ATG is to wait beyond the horizon, and then deploy swiftly as directed by HM government. The whole amphibious force is intended to be self-sustaining and capable of operating without host nation support. The concept was successfully tested in operations in Sierra Leone. Commando Helicopter Force. The Commando Helicopter Force forms part of the Fleet Air Arm. The force comprises 4 helicopter squadrons and is commanded by the Joint Helicopter Command. It consists of both Royal Navy and Royal Marines personnel. RN personnel need not be commando trained. The Commando Helicopter Force is neither under the permanent control of 3 Commando Brigade nor that of the Commandant General Royal Marines, but rather is allocated to support Royal Marines units as required. It uses both Sea King transport and Lynx light-lift helicopters to provide aviation support for the Royal Marines. Selection and training. Royal Marines are required to undergo one of the longest and most physically demanding specialist infantry training regimes in the world. Recruit training lasts for 32 weeks for Marines and 64 weeks for officers. Potential recruits must first undertake a series of interviews, medical tests, an eyesight test, psychometric tests and a PJFT. Once a potential recruit passes these, enlisted recruits undertake a 3-day selection course called PRMC and potential officers undertake POC. Both take place at the Commando Training Centre Royal Marines in Lympstone, Devon. Officers must also take the Admiralty Interview Board. Upon passing the 3-day course, recruits then start basic recruit training at CTCRM. Unlike in many countries, enlisted Marines and officer Marines often train together for the first 32 weeks. A large proportion of training is carried out on Dartmoor's inhospitable terrain and Woodbury Common woodland. The culmination of their training ends with their infamous commando courses, which they initially pre-train for. The commando courses are a series of physical and mental endurance tests that highlight their military professionalism. Throughout the recruit training, Royal Marines learn and develop many military skills such as weapons handling, marksmanship and proficiency with different firearms, personal administration, marching and parade ground skills, map reading and navigation, physical fitness and mental toughness development, fieldcraft skills such as camouflage and stalking, basic survival techniques, patrolling and sentry duty development, unarmed and armed close quarters combat, first aid, underwater escape, chemical biological radiological nuclear training, military communications and signals, teamwork skills, amphibious landings training, and leadership skills for officers to name a few. The best recruit to finish training is awarded the King's Badge. King George V directed that his royal cipher, surrounded by a laurel wreath, would be known as the King's Badge, and would be awarded to the best all-round recruits in the King's Squad, provided that he was worthy of the honour. The badge was to be carried on the left shoulder, and worn in every rank. The King's Badge is not awarded to every squad, and is only presented if a recruit measures up to the very exacting standards required. One of the most famous recipients was C. Capon, the famous dressmaker to nobility. Throughout his career, a Marine can specialize in a number of different roles upon completion of their respective courses after spending 2 years as a general duties Marine. Examples of some specializations in different courses includes the mountain leader, physical training instructor, assault engineer, military police, sniper course, medical assistant, pilot, reconnaissance operator, drill instructor, driver, clerk, chef, signaller, combat intelligence, armorer, and heavy weapons training. Royal Marines can also apply for swimmer canoeists special boat service selection or any other branch of the UKSF. All Royal Marines will also conduct training exercises on differing military skills on a regular basis including development in mountain, Arctic, jungle, amphibious and desert warfare. They can also be involved in exchange training programs with other countries' forces particularly the United States Marine Corps and the Netherlands Marine Corps Corps Mariniers. Customs and traditions. The Royal Marines have a proud history and unique traditions. With the sole exception of Gibraltar, their colours do not carry battle honours in the manner of the regiments of the British Army or of the U.S. Marine Corps, but rather the globe itself as a symbol of the Corps. This reflects their engagement, from aboard ship, in a host of naval battles and skirmishes, and amphibious actions, wherever the Royal Navy fought in the Age of Sail. The heraldic crest of the Royal Marines commemorates the history of the Corps. The lion and crown denotes a royal regiment. King George III conferred this honour in 1802 in consideration of the very meritorious services of the Marines in the late war. The Great Globe itself was chosen in 1827 by King George IV in place of battle honours to recognise the Marines' service and successes in multiple engagements in every quarter of the world. The laurels are believed to honour the gallantry they displayed during the investment and capture of Belle Isle, off Lorient, in April–June 1761. The word Gibraltar refers to the capture of Gibraltar by a force of Anglo-Dutch Marines in 1704 and the subsequent defence of the strategic fortress throughout a 9-month siege against a numerically superior Franco-Spanish force. Their determination and valour throughout the siege led to a contemporary report published in the Triumphs of Her Majesty's Arms in 1707 to announce. Encouraged by the Prince of Hesse, the garrison did more than could humanly be expected, and the English Marines gained an immortal glory. There are no other battle honours displayed on the colours of the 4 battalion-sized units of the current Corps. The Latin motto Per mare paturam translates into English as by sea by land. Believed to have been first used in 1775, this motto describes the Royal Marines' ability in fighting both afloat on board ships of the Royal Navy, as well as ashore in their many land engagements. The fouled anchor, incorporated into the emblem in 1747, is the badge of the Lord High Admiral and shows that the Corps is part of the Naval Service. When referring to individual commandos, 45 Commando is referred to as 45 rather than 45 Commando as is 42 Commando, 40 Commando is 40. The only units which carry colours are 40 Commando, 42 Commando, 43 Commando and 45 Commando. The regimental quick march of the Corps is a life on the ocean wave, while the slow march is the march of the Preobrazhensky Regiment, awarded to the Corps by Admiral of the Fleet Earl Mountbatten of Burma on the occasion of the Corps' tercentenary in 1964. Lord Mountbatten was Life Colonel Commandant of the Royal Marines until his murder by the IRA in 1979. Dress headgear is a white Wolseley pattern pith helmet surmounted by a ball, a distinction once standard for artillerymen. This derives from the part of the corps that was once the Royal Marine Artillery. Their nickname boot neck derives its origins from the leather stock worn round the neck inside the collar by soldiers. The Royal Marines are one of 6 regiments allowed by the Lord Mayor of the City of London to march through the city as a regiment in full array. This dates to the Charter of Charles II that allowed recruiting parties of the Admiral's Regiment of 1664 to enter the city with drums beating and colours flying. Uniforms. The modern Royal Marines retain a number of distinctive uniform items. These include the green Naval Service dress worn with a green beret, the dark blue parade dress worn with either the white Wolseley pattern helmet or white and red peaked cap, the scarlet and blue mess dress for officers and senior non-commissioned officers, and the white hot weather uniform of the band service. For historical information regarding Marine uniforms, see History of the Royal Marines. Order of Precedence. As the descendant of the old Marine regiments of the British Army, the Royal Marines used to have a position in the order of precedence of the infantry. This was after the 49th Regiment of Foot, the final lineal descendant of which was the Royal Gloucestershire, Berkshire and Wiltshire Regiment. Therefore, the Royal Marines would have paraded after the RGBW. This is because the 49th Foot was the last regiment raised prior to the formation of the Corps of Marines as part of the Royal Navy in 1755. In 2007, the RGBW was amalgamated into a large regiment. This new regiment is placed last in the order of precedence, as it is a regiment of rifles. However, as a result of new army amalgamations, the Royal Marines have now been removed from the infantry order of precedence and now always take post, as a constituent part of the Royal Navy, at the head of the parade alongside the Navy, or alone if the Navy are not represented. Thus, if only the infantry is represented, the Royal Marines would parade before the Grenadier Guards, the senior infantry regiment of the Army. Affiliations: Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders. Early connections date from Balaclava in the Crimean War and Lucknow during the Indian Mutiny, but the main association stems from World War II. In July 1940, after the fall of Dunkirk, the 5th Battalion, Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders served with the Royal Marine Brigade for over a year. When the battleships HMS Prince of Wales and Repulse were sunk in December 1941, the Royal Marines survivors joined up with the remnants of the 2nd Battalion, in the defence of Singapore. They formed what became known as the Plymouth Argylls, after the association football team, since both ships were Plymouth-manned. Most of the Highlanders and Marines who survived the bitter fighting were taken prisoner by the Japanese. The Royal Marines Inter-Unit Rugby Football Trophy is the Argyll Bowl, presented to the Corps by the regiment in 1941. A message of greetings is sent to the regiment each year on their regimental day, October 25, the anniversary of the Battle of Balaclava in 1854. The Princess of Wales's Royal Regiment, the forebearer regiments of the Princess of Wales's Royal Regiment, the East Surrey Regiment, was initially raised as amphibious troops. They served as Marines for a period. To this day, one officer from the Royal Marines serves with the PWRR and vice versa. Also, the Royal Marine lanyard is worn by all ranks in service dress and No. 2 dress uniform and barrack dress of PWRR, Netherlands Marine Corps. The Royal Marines have close links with the Royal Netherlands Marine Corps, with whom they conduct NATO exercises throughout the year. Formed during the Anglo-Dutch Wars in 1665, the Dutch Marines distinguished themselves in raids on the English coast, where it is likely they met their future counterparts. Units of the Royal Netherlands Marine Corps work in close cooperation with 3 Commando Brigade of the Royal Marines. Operational units of the Royal Netherlands Marine Corps are fully integrated into this brigade. This integration is known as the United Kingdom Netherlands Landing Force and is a component of the United Kingdom Netherlands Amphibious Force as a key strike force during the Cold War to strengthen the Nordic area. See also, Royal Marines Selection and Training, Royal Marines Reserve, Royal Marines Museum, ACNACRI, Royal Marines Volunteer Cadet Corps, Category, Royal Marines Personnel and its subcategories, for people who have served in the Corps, Notes and References. Notes. Bibliography. External links, Royal Marines website, Royal Marines Band Service website, Royal Marines Volunteer Cadet Corps Portsmouth website, download Royal Marines Registers of Service. The National Archives official website, potential Royal Marines Commando official forum, Ration the Navy Network unofficial website for the Royal Navy, Royal Marines, and Royal Fleet Auxiliary, Royal Marines Museum website, Marine Society website, Royal Navy ranks, professions, and trades in World War II, including Royal Marines, Royal Navy Battle Honours including Royal Marine Corps memorable dates, 1939 to 1945, Royal Marines badges of rank and other insignia.